Welcome to the Michigan Golfer Show. Join us each week as we explore the people, the places, and the events that shape our great game.
Well, it's a beautiful spring day, and we happen to be at the Pete Dye course at French Lick in southern Indiana. And with us is Dave Harner, the director of golf, and you've been director of something for quite a long time here, haven't you?
At times I've wondered director of what, but yes, I've been director of golf since 1987, started my career here in 1976.
1976. So how did you start here?
I was only 3.
Okay. I thought, we were off by a year.
Yeah. I actually started out as a bagroom cart attendant. I was frustrated with the job that I'd had out of high school. We were fairly poor, and I didn't choose college. And walked in the French Lick employment office there at the resort, and the lady was sitting behind the desk, and I said, I really need a job. And she said, we have 2 open. One is a dishwasher, and one is a bag attendant. She said, do you know anything about golf? And I said, well, my grandfather plays, and I've gone with him a few times. She said, you need to go to golf. And thankfully I didn't, choose the other way. It's been good to me.
That's an interesting start, and you actually were here before the casinos, before the Pete Dye course, and before the West Baden Hotel was renovated. So those are huge changes.
They are huge changes. It's been fascinating to watch all that's happened here. I tell everybody I can remember a day when we tried to buy new putting green cups in March, and I got a note back from the controller saying, nope, you'll have to wait until we have some cash flow. So, it's certainly changed from that. The casino made a lot of things possible, and the Cook Group's ownership has just been fantastic. They not only care about the property, but they care about the people who make up the property and the people in the community around the property. So it's been a really good thing.
Well, the golf courses have undergone so many changes. Let's talk a little bit about the Bendelow course.
Well, Bendelow, was an 18-hole golf course, and it's actually our oldest course, built in about 1907. So over time, it's been changed a dozen or more times, and then with the construction of the casino, we were forced to limit it to a 9-hole golf course. It's a very nice 9. It's regulation to par 36. It's got a great practice facility, and we just signed on with Callaway Golf to be one of their premier fitting system hosts in Indiana. So that's been a great addition as well with our golf academy. We do 2 different golf academy experience. One's called our Game Changer, which is a 3-day experience, and then we have our Rapid Recovery for the person whose game gets sick while they're here. Sort of like the emergency room for golfers.
Where did that name come from?
Oh, we just dreamed it up, but 4-hour intense instruction to try to help you patch up what needs fixed.
The Ross course itself was renovated. What was the history of that course? And it was renovated before the Dye course came on, right?
Right. That was our first step, actually, in the modernization and revitalization of the resort. The course was built in 1924. The resort owner at that time was a frequenter of Pinehurst. He met Donald Ross and was quite taken with his work there, so he brought him here. And they rode through the country on horseback and found a piece of land that most favorable for construction. They were able to buy it from a farmer here in the area and built the course. It opened in late 1917, and in 1924 we hosted the PGA Championship. Hagen won the first of, I think, 3 or 4 consecutive PGAs there. Through the years that we've hosted the Midwest Amateur Championship was about a 30-year run for us. Had 400 to 500 amateurs from all over the Midwest that played. Chick Evans won the tournament. Pete Dye won the tournament.
Pete Dye won the tournament.
1957. He said it was the greatest round of golf he ever played. And he was thankful that it rained out after the first round. In fact, it's funny because when Pete was here for the senior PGA, there's a fellow golf professional, his name's Bill Kendall, who just retired a couple of years ago from his course over in on the Naval Base at Crane, and he'd been there 40 years. So he came back to work for me part-time as a cart attendant, and I knew that he had caddied for Pete Dye and in that tournament that Pete won. So when we needed somebody to haul Pete around the golf course during the tournament, the championship, I chose Bill. And Pete remembered him somewhat, but he said, "Man," he said, "you must have been a hell of a caddy."
What a great compliment to get.
Yeah. No, it was a fun time, fun for both of them.
Talk a little bit about the guy you were mentioning who started working here one day after you did.
Yeah, a friend to all of us, Danny Walls, started working here. He always said the day before, I always said the day after. He had actually worked here back in the '60s, right out of school, as a cart guy when the golf carts were first brought here to French Lick, and for Willie Goggin. And I don't know if you know who Willie Goggin is, but he was a famous pro back in the '30s. He finished runner-up in the British Open. He's the first pro to make a hole-in-one in the Masters on the 16th hole. And he was the head golf professional here from 1959 to 1969. He also won the senior PGA championship. But Danny started working for Willie, then left to go in the Army and some other jobs. Came back, and we always had that debate of who'd been here longer. But he had been my right arm here for, all my career. And we lost him, unfortunately, last year due to an accident here on the golf course. And we all miss him greatly, greatly.
Well, Dave, speaking of caddies and carts, the caddies were not real happy when the carts first arrived, were they?
I guess at that time, and I don't remember it, but we had about 300 caddies. And Danny, as I said, was one of the original cart guys. But he told me stories about the caddies at night would drive nails up through the bottoms of the wooden bridges where the carts would run over them and the tires would go flat. And then they had the occasional caddy who was paired in the same group with a golf cart. And, the caddies resented that, and he told me one story about a twosome who had a cart and a twosome who had a caddy being paired together, and the twosome in the cart kept asking the caddy yardage, and he finally looked at him about the third hole and said, "Why don't you ask that golf cart?"
That's a really good answer. Well, I think there's some interesting stories at the beginning of the renovation of the Ross course.
Yeah, we didn't want to change the Ross course. We knew we had a classic there, and we knew that it had been altered over the years. So what we really wanted to do was go back to more of the original design. And back in the late '70s, for some reason, the bank did a renovation here in town, and they changed the vault out. When they did, they found the original Donald Ross drawings in the bank vault. And so we had those original drawings, and were able to give those to our architect, Lee Schmidt, who did the renovation based on those drawings, and with the guidance of Michael Fay. We actually contracted Michael to be an independent contractor, a consultant for us. He's the executive director of the Ross Society. So he came, and between those two and the original drawings, we were able to keep the original design intact and build some extra tees for today's length and that sort of thing. So it was great to have those to go by, and they're still on display in the basement of the clubhouse at the Donald Ross.
When you talk about original drawings, it was certainly before any geographic information systems or anything like that. Pen and ink, pencil, what are they? They
are pencil on graph paper with his typewritten notes on the side. So, he'll talk about shave 8 feet here and add 3 feet there, but nothing like the amount of dirt we moved here at the die course. We moved somewhere around 3.5 million cubic yards of dirt here. In those days, they were doing it with horses, so we didn't move much dirt up there in those days.
Well, the Ross course to me is stunning because you can basically stand on one of the hills and see pretty much every single hole.
You can, yeah. I always, as a high school golf coach, I coached a high school team for about 11 years, and I had my little spot there at the top of the hill between 5 and 12, and you can see everything except the 8th, 9th, 16th, 17th, and 18th. From there, so those kids couldn't get by with anything.
That's their home course?
Yes, they play their home. Springs Valley High School plays its home meets there, and it's a great advantage.
Yeah, lucky kids.
Yeah, those greens, alone knowing those greens is a pretty good advantage.
Mm-hmm. Sure is. That reminds me of something else. You've been very involved in various civic organizations. You've been involved in the PGA. You've worn quite a few hats over the years. Of all the things that you've done along the way, besides French Lick, what stands out? What's your favorite?
Well, I think junior golf, my wife and I and a couple of other people founded our county junior golf association in about 1995. We filed a nonprofit 501(c) corporation, and we've run junior golf here in the county for about 22 years now. Over time, of course, the game's lure for younger people has sort of died off, but through the efforts of the PGA of America and different organizations, now we have First Tee and different things. And last year we were awarded our own First Tee chapter here in French Lick. So we're back at it. We had about 80 kids last year. We just had our kickoff Masters Sunday. We did a broadcast of the Masters there in our indoor facility, and we had the snag golf equipment and attracted about, 150 people total.
Wow, that's a good way to keep the game growing, isn't it?
Somebody's got to. We're at a point now in golf that, and I tell all my pros here and the assistants that, I'm nearing the end of doing this, but you guys got another 40 years. You need to figure out a way. If you're going to be in this business, you got to get active and get that job done.
So let's talk a little bit about the Pete Dye course. Pete Dye is an Indiana native. As you said, he won at the Ross course. That's amazing. I didn't know that before. So it's logical that he would do the next course. How did that get started?
Well, we had a lot of architects here to look at, the property. Everybody had a different opinion, and we were close to a decision on an architect. And one day Mr. Ferguson's phone rang, and it was Alice Dye. And she said, "I can't believe you haven't had Pete down to look at French Lick because we live right in your backyard," which was a very good point. I think we just never realized, So Mr. Ferguson, I believe he met Pete over in Martinsville. They had a little meeting. Pete came down, walked the property, and told us there's no way that you can build a golf course there. And then he called back and he said, "I'll be down tomorrow." So he came back. I walked the next day with him. And, we got back to the car, and I said, "Well, what do we do now, Pete?" And he says, "Well, you tell your boss I'm going to build it whether he wants me to or not." And then that's when we went over for lunch at a local restaurant, and he pulled a napkin out of the napkin holder, and he drew this sketch, and he said, "Here's your golf course." So, me being me, I didn't really think about that. And, I hauled the napkin around on the dashboard of my car, and it's sliding around, and the windows are down, and it's blowing all around in the car. And then about a month later, it takes me a while to catch on. About a month later, I thought, you know what? That's it. We're not going to get anything else. We're done. This is the drawing. And if you go look at it, it's over in the pro shop. And if you go look at it, it matches identically to what we have here today. And I tell you, when we walked it that day, you couldn't see straight up. It was tempered land, and it was rough, really rough. And so Pete, did exactly what he planned.
The first time I saw that napkin, I'd heard about it. I expected it to be pretty vague. It isn't. It's specific.
No, there are tees and greens, and if you look at the bottom, he shows you how he lays the rocks in the lake. And, the first thing that caught me about Pete was the conversation about water in the golf course. And I'm thinking, well, you want to put the water down low and pump it up. He didn't. He put the water up high, which I'm still, taken by, the fact that the water's up here on the highest hill. I thought it'd be in the lowest valley. And he said, true, it's easier to catch there, but it's harder to distribute from there. So, he knew what he was doing.
Speaking of hills, isn't the Dye course on one of the highest hills in Indiana?
Yeah, we're sitting right now in the clubhouse, and it's at the second highest point in Indiana at about 952 feet above sea level. So we're second highest.
And you had mentioned moving dirt, and you moved trees. What happened to all that wood?
Well, we sold a lot of the smaller timber, actually traded the bigger timber for the disposal of the smaller. They made mulch of it, the smaller, 8-inch diameter and down. The bigger timber they took as a fee for doing the clearing. But it's a funny story. My boss is quite a conservationist, and he had us go out there and mark about 200 trees on the design. And, so Pete would leave those trees. Well, Pete didn't have a lot of regard for trees. So he bulldozed them all except one. And Art and you guys probably remember the one tree that we had left, and we had a media event right after the Ryder Cup when Hurricane Ike was blowing through Indiana, and we lost that one tree at that point. But it was funny because Pete and I were walking out there, and I saw this poor tree. It was a huge oak tree, and it was right on the highest point, and you could see it for miles as you drove in. And the side was all skinned from another tree, and a bulldozer had hit it, and the roots were all sticking up. And, of course, it became a challenge for us because the boss wanted to save it. So we put irrigation in, we put lightning protection in it. And I looked at Pete, and I said, Pete, for God's sake, why didn't we just take it down? Because I'm going to have to someday. He said, your boss likes trees, so I left him one.
And it disappeared anyway, but it also, when you're almost anywhere on the die course, you can see almost 360 degrees of horizon. That's a very unusual feature.
Well, it doesn't, certainly when you drive in and pop up that hill by the flagpole, it doesn't look like Indiana. You know, it looks like Virginia or West Virginia or the Carolinas, mountainous country. We're fortunate because around us there's several thousand acres of protected Hoosier National Forest, so you don't really have anything that impedes the view as far as housing or any of that. You almost don't see any. You know, I want to get back to the tree. If you look out there at the 8th tee and you look off to your left, you'll see a stone there with it talks about the mighty oak tree, and it says, saved by Steve Ferguson and Pete Dye, 2009, taken by God, something 2011.
So the tree has its own monument then?
It has its own monument, and Alice Dye and I did that as kind of a joke because she knew the great dispute about trees. So
that's kind of fun too. Well, with the Pete Dye course, major tournaments have come back, and that's a lot of work and a lot of excitement, both. What do the players say about the Pete Dye course?
Well, the winners love it. You can go about 3 players down, and they all love it, and then from there on, it's sort of a neutral. And then about the bottom 2/3 that are not in love with it. It's a tough test. I mean, if you're not accurate on this golf course, and if you're not missing the greens in the right places, it can be very, very difficult. And for the amateur player, if you play it too far back, it can be very, very difficult. There's no question. We have a set of tees at 8,100 yards. So I've seen a lot of people start at 8,100 yards. I've not seen very many finish at 8,100. In fact, they move up, and then they move up, and then they move up, and they finally wind up on the right set of tees after a couple holes. So.
Well, you get better score if you shoot a little bit forward, but because it's also misleading because you can see so far, it doesn't look that far.
Well, true. The greens are fairly small here too, and if you're hitting driver and you're lucky enough to get it in the fairway and you've still got 200 yards to a green that's less than 4,000 square feet, it's a pretty good test. I mean, some of the rooms some of the greens aren't any bigger than this room. And if you miss them, you've got those bailout areas that Pete's so known for that make it difficult to get the ball back up on the green and in the hole.
Well, Dave, you started out, you had just a couple people working, and now you have a lot. How many?
When I first met you, I think I had a staff for 2 golf courses with the maintenance crew of about 40, maybe, if that. I had no assistants, no head pros. It was kind of just me and some folks, and we held it together pretty well. Golf stayed, the Ross course stayed in the top 10 in Indiana consistently at 4 or 5, and it was an okay golf experience. The resort got in a terrible state of disrepair. Of course, now my areas of supervision are the 3 golf courses, the 2 golf course restaurants, and the grounds at the hotels. So I now have 140 employees where I had 40 before. So, and that just proves the economic development that's occurred and people having jobs here that didn't have jobs before. I mean, we went from when we closed in 2005 to do the renovation of the French Lick Hotel, we employed 350 people. We reopened with about 1,500.
Wow. Talk about economic development. That's just huge. Tell us a little bit about Steve Ferguson.
Well, Steve Ferguson is, Steve's got quite a responsibility. He's the chairman of the board of the Cook Group. He has farms. He loves the outdoors. loves the game of golf. Unfortunately, he hadn't been able to play a lot of golf. He had a knee injury and some other things that went on, and he's still not back on the course. And I know he's dying to get back out there, but the most fair guy that I've run into, and I've worked for a lot of people, and he's been. If he came in tomorrow and said, "Dave, you don't have a job anymore," I'd say, "Well, can we still be friends?" It's kind of like a bad breakup. Can we still be friends?
Not likely to happen. You're kind of the institutional memory of French Lick Resort.
Institutionalized, maybe.
What have we missed about your career here?
You look back at a career, and as I told you down at the range earlier, all the awards and those things are nice, but it's the people that you leave behind with your knowledge and with your legacy to carry on your work. I talked earlier about Danny Walls, and I always prided myself because we didn't have a lot to work with, and I always prided myself in trying to make everything we had as neat as we could and keep it clean, and that's really all we could do. And Danny's golf carts, when Cook took this thing over, our golf carts were 13 years old. They looked brand new. So I looked in the cart shed the other day, and the Ross carts are like 7 or 8 years old, which is old for a fleet at a place like this. They look sparkling new. So the guys have picked up where Danny left off, and they've continued, and that has to be a credit to him, and I would hope that our team does the same when I'm gone.
And that's absolutely not true everywhere, but I certainly noticed it this morning.
That's right. That's that sense of pride that people have here, and the hospitality here. I think that's not direct credit to me, but I think that's an important part of our experience here is the hospitality. Bricks and mortar are great to have, and shiny new things are great to have, but if you don't have the other to go with it, you're pretty much fighting a losing battle. Okay, first of all, we'll look at our awards here. This is a special area for us. In 2012, we won the Indiana Golf Course of the Year, and only 3 years into our business here at Pete Dye. We were able to come back and win again in 2017, the Indiana Course of the Year, and we're fortunate enough to be named the National Golf Course of the Year by the National Golf Course owners this year. So we're really proud of that. Behind that, you can see the replica trophy from the 2010 PGA PNC that Mike Small won here. Right next to that, we have a golf bag from our Legends Tour Championship that we hosted from 2013 through 2016 and has now evolved into the Senior LPGA Championship. But there's a lot of pretty significant signatures here. Joanne Harner, Jan Stevenson, Jane Blaylock, Nancy Lopez, Lissalette Neumann, the list goes on. This is probably the crown jewel of our championship hosting. We were so fortunate as to partner with KitchenAid and Whirlpool to host the 2015 Senior PGA Championship. This is the golf bag that's signed by all the players, including our champion, Colin Montgomery. Very gracious and very great champion for us. Then the replica trophy, the Alfred Bourne trophy, of course. Here's some more of our Senior LPGA items. Of course, our trophy from the four Legends Championship that we've had. That winners include Laurie Kane, Laurie Rinker, Trish Johnson, and of course the great Julie Inkster. So we'll be looking forward to having the next phase, the Senior LPGA, here in July.
Well, we've always felt welcome here. I know everyone who comes here feels welcome here, and it's just a real treat to be back on this beautiful spring day, and we thank you for all you've done for French Lick and also for golf and for spending time with us today. Thank you, Dave.
Well, and a special thanks to you guys because you have been here since, the 1990s and beyond, and you've seen the evolution as I have. You guys stuck with us when we couldn't pay you, and that's a great thing.
Thanks.
We hope you enjoyed your visit at French Lick Resort. Thank you.